All right, we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to The Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Rob Russ, and I'm joined by my good mate, Ed Anderson. G'day, Ed. How you doing, mate? Good afternoon, good evening.
Hey, buddy.
I'm joined by my good mate, Ed Anderson. You got to mute that in the background there for me if you can.
Yeah, let me. Okay. Buddy, hold on.
There it is. Mute that in the background there for me.
I did. Yeah, you know what I do? I have our show running on somewhere so I can keep track of how many people are watching. Yeah, sorry about that. And
that's all good. How you doing today, man? You good?
Huh?
How you doing today? You good?
Living the dream. Yeah, beautiful day here. It's weather is just right, and I'm spending this beautiful time. You know, I could be outside for a nice walk here with you inside. And
you're indoors doing the unspoken truth.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here, welcome. It's great to have you here. Ed and I are live here every day talking about the stories behind the mainstream media. We're available as a podcast over on Spotify and Apple. We're also available on Twitter and Telegram, and all of the links are down below in the description. So make sure you come on over and follow us over on those platforms as well. We've got some trouble in the bond market, Ed. There's a lot going on with that. All right, when you told me that you were going to talk about that this morning, I Googled it quickly and I was like, ooh. Oh dear, and that's another signal that we're approaching the beginning of the end as interest rates go up and the bond yield goes down. There's a big problem happening there, right?
Yeah, people really need to be paying attention to stuff out there right now, because one of these days there's going to be a huge event, and it's not going to be a fun one. And this is just one of the potential time bombs that could be going off. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking forward to getting some deeper insights into that. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to pay attention to these things. You need to keep one eye and one ear on the news and look out for these signals. So when this happens, it doesn't actually catch you unawares. If you can anticipate what's going to happen and you're in a position, you might be able to even capitalize on something like this, which is the idea. And we don't want to get caught unawares, as I mentioned. So overnight, we've had the meeting kickoff. The NATO meeting kickoff in Vilnius in Lithuania, and the announcement's been made about Ukraine. Are they in? Are they out? They're half in, they're half out. They seem to be half pregnant, which is really kind of strange. Zelensky got a little bit fired up because there's no real clear time frame for NATO membership. But at no stage have NATO ever said, hey, you're going to come into this alliance while you're at war, because that's the rule. You can't join the alliance while you're at war. But they have reduced the time frame and reduced some of the things that the Ukrainians will need to do. They've reduced a thing called the Membership Action Plan, the MAP. And the Membership Action Plan is related to economic, defense, resource, security, and legal aspects of a given country. So they've kind of dispensed with all of that. But Norway and Sweden had to do all of that in the last couple of months to get there. But Zelensky is just saying, well, you know, we already comply with all of everything that you need to do from a weapon system, from a leadership perspective in our military. But NATO joining the alliance is not just about the military. There's a series of other things that they have to cover off on before they can get accepted, because you don't want to be working in the alliance as a corrupt country. And we all know that this is the most corrupt country in the world, and I think that's even acknowledged by the Ukrainians themselves, that there's a serious problem with corruption that has to be stamped out as well. In other news in my region, I couldn't find too much about it, but the Chinese have signed another security pact with the Solomon Islands. And the people from the Solomon Islands seem to have short memories when the Japanese occupied them, that we came and rescued them and we stopped all of that from happening. And now you have the Chinese in there. I'm not saying they're the same as the Japanese, but you have the Chinese going in there, not with their military, but with their economic coercion. So I'm certain that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Prime Minister, and the people in that department, their heads are exploding about, what are we doing? We've been sending hundreds of millions of dollars to this country, and this is just going sideways on us, and there's no way for them to control it. And when you look at the policies of Australia and the way that we've treated our Pacific Island neighbours, you've got to wonder why it's not working from our perspective. But when you look at it from their perspective, it's as if these people from Australia keep coming here and just giving us money and telling us what we can and can't do. You know what? They can do whatever they want. They're a sovereign country. And if they want to align themselves with China, they can. And if they want to still be friends with Australia, they can. In other words, they're playing both sides of the coin, sitting in the middle, taking all the money. And you've got to wonder what's happening in the middle of all of that. And is that a corrupt country? Well, it was. I don't know how to feel about it. I don't know what to do, but it is a failure of Australian foreign policy if you're unable to coerce them into remaining part of our alliance.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to think how easy would it have been to keep them on friendly terms. I mean, come on.
The
Yeah,
failing, in my view, is not the terms that we have with countries like the Solomon Islands. It's the leadership, and it's the belligerent leadership that we have here in Australia, where Scott Morrison used to go around there, and he's just like a bulldozer, man. He even had said it himself. You know, my personality is like a bulldozer. Yeah, you just go in there and do whatever you want, and you don't treat them as equals. You treat them as subordinates, as if they're going to have to fall in line with what you do because you've got the economic power to tell them what to do. But really, at the end of the day, they've existed without you and your economic coercion the whole time. So what's the difference between what Australia is doing to the Solomon Islands and what China is doing? Well, China is taking a slightly different approach, saying, what is it that you need? How can we help you? But the Australian government would also argue that we go in there saying, what is it that you need? How can we help you? But it's the attitude that's quite different. And you never really know, because you don't know how the Chinese are approaching it, because you don't see what's happening behind closed doors. But what we do know from what we do see and the optics of it on the front end is that the Solomon Islands seem to prefer to working with the Chinese, and they seem to be working with New Zealand, Australia, and America. It's like, well, what did you think was going to happen if you go around doing that?
well, this is one of the reasons why Australia is often referred to as America's mini-me.
And you've said it a couple of times in the last few weeks that, you know, the American government goes around the world using the dollar, and they play whack-a-mole with the dollar and leveraging countries just economically and financially. And that doesn't seem to be working here with the Solomon Islands. Maybe that's because they've got hundreds of millions of dollars already from Australia, New Zealand, and America. And with those hundreds of millions of dollars, they're able to say, well, you know, that buys us enough time to negotiate with the Chinese, which ultimately they want to work with, and to sort out the problems there as well. Unfortunately, it's happened just north of Australia as well. In Papua New Guinea, there was a port that the Chinese were talking about building for the folks in PNG, and that would then allow the Chinese Navy to get a foothold in our neighborhood just up the road. It's not much different to the Chinese setting up spy bases in Cuba for the United States. It's the same sort of thing. Although the Chinese ability to project their naval power in a blue water navy to that part of the world is pretty limited. You know, even if they send a couple of frigates and destroyers and, you know, some supply ships and stuff like that, so what, man? Like, so, like, everyone's all this like big ruckus over nothing. But the problem is we've spent like literally billions of dollars in Papua New Guinea over the years in economic development. And the minute the Chinese come along and say, hey, we'll build you a port, they go, yeah, all right, please, can you, why haven't we done that? In all of our wisdom and our infinite wisdom, why haven't we done that? It's ridiculous, man.
Lack of imagination, I guess. I mean, you just watch. There's a possibility China might emerge from this Ukraine-Russia conflict as the big peacemaker. You know, they could sweep in. They might be able to broker a peace, and then that's really going to diminish America's influence around the world. You know, we are playing this so wrong. We make at every turn we are being outwitted by the Chinese, and you
My
know,
fear is the clock is ticking, yeah, because the Chinese know that Joe Biden is the weakest leader in American history, so therefore the weakest leader ever in world history. And what that says to me is, if the Chinese don't do something about acting on Taiwan or whatever other policy that they have in relation to their geopolitics and them being positioned as the 21st century, the superpower of the 21st century, if they don't do something in the next 12 to 18 months, they're going to miss their window. So the chances of a conflict in this region where I am are much, much higher than they ever were. And when I remember there was a politician here in Australia, or he's an ex-politician, his name's Corey Bernardi. He was in the Liberal Party. He left Parliament. He's now a commentator on TV. But he came out and said that the build-up that we're seeing in China is like what we saw with Nazi Germany in the 1930s. And he was hugely criticised as a result of that. They were like, you can't say that, man. You can't. They're our biggest trading partner. You can't talk about them like that. You can't say those things. And he's like, but it's true. It's true. And everybody just kind of slammed him. I think it was Corey Bernardi. Anyway, whoever it was that said it, I remember they were slammed in the media. And here we are, fast forward like 18 months, 2 years later after those comments were made, and everyone's like, oh my God, there's going to be a war with China. What are we going to do? It's like, see, he was right. the whole time. He just said the quiet part out aloud that nobody wanted to say. And the result of that is now we've had a defense strategic review. And the defense strategic review here in Australia has said that Australia's military is not fit for purpose. And you go, what? What do you mean it's not fit for purpose? What? Imagine a member of the public that didn't know anything about geopolitics or the military, and they're saying, what do you mean the military is not fit for purpose? Don't you have planes and ships and guns and armies and tanks and stuff like that? Yeah, we've got all of that. But what do you mean it's not fit for purpose? Like, unbelievable that they've said that publicly. And, you know, we need to move our strategic posture to something that makes it more of a deterrence. And they're using deterrence as the way of stopping something from happening. You know, we live on a freaking island in the middle of nowhere. That's the first thing that we can solve. And if someone's going to attack us, we want to be more prickly, and we want to have more long-range missiles, and we want to have all these sorts of different weapon systems. Man, how did you not see this coming? Hopeless.
You know, that's a pet peeve of mine, now that you mention it, are these politicians who say things that they shouldn't be saying in public. You know, you don't want to give your enemy free information, free intel. You know, we've had politicians come on TV recently. We had Joe Biden giving an interview talking about how they're out of ammunition. They're out of this, right?
Joe, why are you giving them cluster bombs?
Yeah.
They're out of ammunition.
That's right.
No, because we're out of ammunition, he said. We're running low.
Right. They're out of ammunition and we're running low on ammunition. What the hell? The Russia KGB intel officers must be saying, man, this is the easiest job I ever had. You know, we're getting intel from the horse's mouth.
He's going, hey, Yuri, just take that bug out, man. Don't worry. He just told us. Come home, man. Let's go and get a coffee.
Why do we even bother with spy satellites? We just have politicians giving us all the information we need.
You know, it happened yesterday here in Australia, man.
Really?
So Anthony Albanese's in Europe for the NATO meeting. He went to Germany and he announced, so we have a Rheinmetall factory in Brisbane here, and the Germans, so German business kind of licensed their stuff to us in our part of the world, and we sold them 100 vehicles. And it's $1 billion deal, right? So it's a great deal for Australian jobs and all of that. But at the same time, they announced that we're going to send one of our E7 Wedgetails to Germany, and that's going to end up in the fight in Ukraine, of course. And this is like a modern day version of an AWACS. It has really sophisticated E-Link capabilities and C-Link capabilities and controlling abilities as well. It's been deployed several times. Great bit of kit. Really capable bit of equipment. We don't have many of them. I think we've just got a handful of them, like 5 of them, but we don't need that many because we're not that big an Air Force. But so to get that asset into the fight. But right at the end of this interview, so the Defence Minister here in Australia, his name's Richard Miles, and he's also the Deputy Prime Minister. So when Albo's away overseas, this guy's the acting Prime Minister. And man, the reporter's asking him, like, you know, we're deploying an E7, what is it? And he ums and ahs his way through this interview, and he's trying to sort of not say something about it, but then say something about it because all the technology on it's top secret, but he doesn't want to give away our secrets. But right at the end, he kind of gives away when the deployment's going to happen. And if you've been watching this conflict and you're watching geopolitics, you can join the dots, 2 and 2 together. Because he said, you know, when's the deployment happening? Oh, well, we're not going to go into that, but you know, the capability they've been asking for a little while, and when the timing is right, we'll put that capability in the theatre. You know, he said words to the effect of that, but he said and ah about 55 times in there, and he kind of danced around the question and whatnot. And I'm just listening to this guy thinking, imagine if I was an Air Force guy, if I was an Air Force operator sitting in the back of that plane, or I was a maintainer, and they're like, they're sending us to where? To Germany, to Ramstein. Okay, cool. That's a strange deployment. Why are we going there? What did he say? And he's and ahhing about all these things. But if you join the dots about what he's saying, we're going to send the AWACS there and send it when the F-16s arrive, because that's going to be the controlling element for the Vipers. And I look at it and think, you just gave it away, man, when we're deploying. So pretty much you're giving away when the F-16s are going to be in country, and you're telegraphing to the Russians, F-16s will be in country, and here's the Wedgetail as well, all at the same time. And I'm just thinking, don't you? And you're the acting Prime Minister? Like, fuck, man, get your shit together, because you're giving away operational secrets. And I'm just a dude watching you on the news. Imagine the operational, like, the intelligence people that sit there all day and analyze every single word that the guy's saying, and they have a complete and total picture of everything that's going on. And the Russians have incredible intelligence gathering capabilities. They're watching, and they're listening and doing the same thing as me. And if I can join the dots in, like, just because I'm looking at it and thinking, man, this guy is hopeless, imagine what they're thinking. Imagine what they know about it. And you just think, man, these people are in charge. Get some adults in there, will you? Jeez.
You know, back in World War II, or I think even up to the Vietnam War, if a politician had given away that kind of information, they'd be in jail.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I saw there was a Fox report, and there was he was an Army Ranger or something like that. He was a defense contractor. And the reporter said, "Oh, what do you think about Joe Biden saying that?" And he said, "Well, if it was me, you know, a non-commissioned officer or an officer that had said that to the media, we would face disciplinary action or we would be in jail. That's how it is." But here he is out there doing that, and the guy's just like exasperated. He's like, what do you say, right? What do you do?
Well, and look, they're given cover by our media and by our, criminal defense department or DOJ. So yeah, listen, that guy is not. What the hell? He shouldn't be in. He should just stay in bed. This guy has no business being president of the United States. I don't know why they even put him on TV anymore for interviews. What are they thinking?
Did you see him with Prince Charles?
No, I didn't see that one.
Oh my God! So when they inspect,
you mean King Charles?
King Charles. Yeah, we know when they inspect the soldiers, they walk up and down the ranks and stuff. So typically in Western militaries, when you do that, and I mean, it's the British military, it's a Western military, the person inspecting will come along and stop and talk to a soldier. Hey, mate, how you doing? What are you doing? Where'd you get that medal from? And they just chit-chat with you a little bit. And so Joe was doing that with one or two people, but in the British protocol, they're not allowed to do that. So Charles is all like cranky and scathing, and there's photos of him like scolding that soldier. But Joe Biden is like holding on to King Charles as he's walking around, and he touches him about 5 or 6 times as he's walking around. And is Joe doing that because he's like, come on, mate, let's go type thing. We're friends, we're doing that. And it's just cordial and friendly. He's a public figure. That's how they do those things. I look at that and think, well, maybe there's some element of that, but there's also some element of him seeming to be kind of lost. And he's doing that. It's like, where are we going next? And he's kind of holding on to him and like, what's happening next? And he seems to be like disorientated while this is going on. And I'm scratching my head. What the hell's going on here, man? It's crazy.
Yeah. No. He's not a well man. And it's shameful that they keep putting him through this. It's elderly abuse.
Indeed it is. There's a scandal developing before we kick off into the Bond part of the show. I want to share an interview I listened to yesterday. I'll find the link and I'll put it in the description after the broadcast here. But there's a huge Hunter Biden style scandal happening here in Australia where the Prime Minister has been implicated in it. And there's a guy that has been working with Freedom of Information requests and getting it from ASIC, so the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, and he's caught Albo in something that he shouldn't be in. We don't quite know what it is because he's waiting to have all of the dots joined and to get all the FOI requests across. But suffice to say, the story will break sometime next week, and it will be a scandal like we've never seen before in Australian political history, apparently. And so I just wanted to telegraph that with the audience to say that it seems like the Australian Prime Minister has been caught up in a corruption scandal. And the funny thing is, this fella that's doing the investigation, he's just a dude like you and me. He's just somebody who cares about his country. He's not I don't think he's a journalist. He's not an investigative journalist or anything like that. He's just a dude that's like, really? This is what's going on? Hang on, let me send the FOI request. Let me get all these documents. And he's gone so far down that rabbit hole that he's now been able to join all of the dots, and he's about to expose the Australian Prime Minister as being corrupt. And I don't know what evidence he has. I'm on the edge of my seat to see what's going on. But one thing he did disclose in the interview yesterday was that he said he had information that the Prime Minister had met with people that were under criminal investigation. And so he reached out to the Prime Minister's office and said, hey, at this time and date, did the PM go and meet these people? And they were like, yes, he did.
Well,
and then they're like, well, where are the photos? But we've got confirmation that those meetings actually went ahead and it happened. So I'm not really sure what it's all in relation to. I couldn't join those dots from the call. I was like listening very carefully to the podcast that they had. It went on for about half an hour or 40 minutes or something like that. But it was a big thing because this guy is just in Wollongong, just kind of an hour south of where I am here on the East Coast. And he comes onto the podcast and he's like, just so everybody knows, it's 2:00 in the morning. And I just got this email from the UK and I thought this was so important that I called my mate up to get on the show and tell everybody about it, because I need to tell everyone, you need to know about this straight away. And it's like he keeps gathering this evidence, whatever the evidence is, and he's putting it out there as quickly as possible. So it seems like we're going to have another giant distraction in Australian politics. And this, man, our country is suffering badly under a huge cost of living crisis, huge interest rate rises, incredible petrol prices, huge unemployment problems, and low employment participation problems. We have all sorts of society issues. And then the government's overseas handing off our assets and funding other countries, all while the Prime Minister of Australia is corrupt. And I'm just,
wow.
What? What's happening?
A corrupt politician.
No.
Wow.
Well, they were the comments in the YouTube video, right? Who would have thought? Come on, man. Why are you so surprised? Why is this such a big deal? Why? That's
Here
like,
in America,
this is going to be the biggest story of the year.
Here in America, we just call that Tuesday. So,
we'll see what happens.
Shout out to Paulie, by the way. Paulie, thanks for the comment. Our friend in the Netherlands, and alerting us to what's going on there with Mark Rudy being booted out, which is great news. And I think you're right. I think it is going to end up being a promotion for him. But he does end up with a big time position at the EU. So we're going to be talking about that more pretty soon in the upcoming shows. But I just wanted to acknowledge, Paulie, that that we saw your comment and we will be getting into that. So yeah, please keep your information coming though. We love to get the insights from a local.
Yeah, I couldn't corroborate the same, probably the same stories I was watching in relation to that as well. He hasn't left politics that we know of yet. He's left Dutch politics, but he might end up in the EU or NATO or something like that as well. So interesting to see what's actually going to happen. Interesting to see what will happen in the Netherlands as well. Will the Farmers' Party get up and, will the people power take it all back, and will something happen there? Be interesting to see, because you don't have to look too far over the horizon to see what's coming. If you want to go down the path of ESG and all that bullshit, all you're going to do is look to Sri Lanka. If you want to look to these ridiculous farming policies and stuff like that, all you got to do is look to the EU, and you can see that in play there as well. So it's crazy. Sorry, Ed, I cut you off there. What were you going to say?
Maybe Miss Netherlands will run for office.
Man, the posts going around about that yesterday were just absolutely, oh man.
Oh, you got to fill me in. Okay.
It's crazy. All right, why don't we get into the bond market and talk a little bit about that, because we're kind of meandering here about a few different things, which is part of the unspoken truth. That's part of the conversation in the podcast, of course. But we have the inverse relationship to the bond market and interest rates. And as interest rates go up, what happens to the bond market?
Well, you got me, Rob.
Comes down, doesn't it?
I guess I'll have to wait to watch my report to see the answer to that.
All right, let's show me your report. Let's see.
All right.
So today I want to talk to you about the bond market. Now, you might think that the government bonds is a safe place to be, right? The good old government bond market. Well, I'm here to tell you that it is not safe, and it is actually a system that is destined to disappear. In fact, I will argue that it must disappear.
The first 90 years or so, they go by pretty fast.
Okay, so let's understand one thing from the get-go, okay? Debt is created out of thin air. Debt is borrowed into existence. That's true whether you're talking about a bank, but it's also true about the government itself. Now, it is an unfun fact that only about 49% of our government expenditures every year are financed through taxes.
You should have X amount of dollars rolling in by the end of this year.
X amount. That's very good, isn't it?
To cover our remaining expenditures, our government resorts to issuing more debt, and that makes this system untenable. Bonds are not safe. Let's take a look at a few charts to prove my point, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more thoroughly on the back end. Okay, so this is a yield chart of the U.S. 30-year bond. And you can see that it has bumped its head against that 4% level 1, 2, 3, now 4 times. And now it's looking to break through. We have that ascending trend. We will be seeing higher interest rates. So interest rates are going to continue to go up. And this affects anybody with a mortgage, a car payment, anything that has interest rate attached to it. Our lives are going to get more expensive. Now, this is a chart of both the UK and the US 10-year government bond yield. The yellow line represents the US bond market, and the bar chart below it, that represents the UK bond market. And you can see up at the top here, UK is actually doing worse than the US. And for those of you who are technicians, let me draw a line here for you. Okay, see that little cup and handle we have going there? So again, yields are going to be going higher. Okay, so this is where I remind you that there is an inverse relationship between yields and principal. As the interest rate on a bond goes up, the value of the bond goes down. That little teeter-totter effect, that's very important for you to understand. As yields go up, the value of your bonds go down. So we just looked at how the yields are doing, how they're going up. So let's take a look at how the value of the underlying bonds have been doing. There you go. This is a chart of the 20-year Treasury bond ETF. We have all sorts of patterns here, right? We have a double top, we have a head and shoulders, and at the moment, we have a little congestion going on with a 1, 2, 3 triple top there going, and it's breaking down some more. So the value of U.S. Treasuries are going down. But of course they are, because the yields are going up. That's the way it works. So let's say that the value of bonds go to 8, 10, 20, 30, 40%. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm getting a really nice return on your money. Well, no, don't buy those bonds. Because look what happened in Argentina. You might have bought their bonds when they're paying 40%. But then they went up to 80% and 100%. And the more interest rates go up, the more the value of the bonds go down. Now, listen, this is a game that the government is playing. And they're trying to make this last as long as possible. But there is going to be a point at which it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable right now. The only solution they have right now is to borrow more money every year. And on top of that, you have politicians who continue to spend. They have no respect for money. But at this point, there is no going back. There's no saving our financial system. Our financial system is going to end. And that reset from our current financial system to whatever new one they are waiting for us is not going to be a pleasant one. It's going to be a very painful transition. The name of the game right now is preservation of capital. So number one, you have to get your money out of the bank. I mean, if you want to keep 1 or 2 months there for bill paying, I get it. I do the same. But beyond that, get it the hell out of your bank. Money sitting in the bank is not only not safe, but it's depreciating in value. But the real preservation of your capital is this, gold and silver. And it is the only actual method of preserving your capital that I can think of. Now, some people might say, well, how about real estate? Not for me, man. Real estate is going to have its own crisis in the midst of all this. Gold and silver has a 4,000 to 5,000 year history of preserving its value. Gold and silver is the only game in town for preserving your capital. Then beyond that, establish streams of passive recurring income. You have to find a way to keep up with and actually get ahead of inflation. These are serious times. Our politicians and the people in charge of our money, they're not looking out for you. They're playing a dangerous game, and their money printing efforts and their debt creation efforts is only going to make things worse in the end. Listen, this is one of the reasons why this war in Ukraine has to keep going on. This is a big money laundering operation. A lot of people are making a lot of money off of this war, and they're taking that money that's coming back to them, and they're buying hard assets. They're buying real estate, and I promise you, they're buying gold and silver. For the people who are really keeping this war going, it's a big wealth transfer event. That war isn't really about borders. It's about money. And with the pending collapse of our current monetary system, they're speeding things up. It's like that guy who's planning to abscond from his country, move to another country because he has a lot of debt. So he spends whatever he has left on his credit card, buys as much stuff as he can, then he probably buys the gold and silver, and then leaves the country with no intention of paying his debt back. That's what's going on here. In the end, our governments have no intention of paying off our debt. They're not even going to try because it is literally impossible. They cannot maintain these debt levels. That's my little report for the day. If you don't mind, give me a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Ed Anderson, live from Minnesota, signing out.
Well, it's an awfully complicated subject. If I'm getting this incredible yield, but the value of it's going down, people would be like, why would I ever get into something like that then? Because it's just where it actually works is when there's an equilibrium in the market, right? Where you're getting that's a nice safe return. What about treasury bills, man? Is that the same thing?
Yep.
So same inverse relationship to the
Yep.
interest rate?
Yep.
Aren't you buy T-bills on short terms with like
Yeah, you can't.
1
Okay.
month and 2-3 month
Yeah.
returns, getting 5-6% like that month
Yeah.
to month?
Yeah. Okay. So that'd be a fairly good compromise, right? Say, all right, I want to do bonds. I don't want to take the risk. So stick to shorter term bonds. Yeah, that's a good compromise.
Because when I Googled T-bill, or like I just Googled buy T-bills as you were saying that, because no way I'm buying bonds. I look at that and I see a sponsored ad for Mountain Assets Fund, mountainassets.fund, and I won't click on it because it's an ad. It says government bond, 10% fixed return, earn financial freedom through regular income, low minimum investment of $100,000, inquire today and receive 10% paid monthly to you. Well, if I tip in $100,000 and I'm getting $1,000 a month out of it, that's
Okay,
pretty good
listen.
return.
Let's say someone did. They say, "Oh, I'll play it safe. I'll just buy a 6-month, T-bill." What could happen in 6 months?
A lot, man. A lot
could happen.
because of this reason, because of the whole market's driven by interest rates. Yeah,
That's right. You never know what black swan event could come along, because we have so many areas of the financial industry right now that are on thin ice. Any one of which could send us reeling. Okay, now, if people will recall, back in 2008, the culprit for that disaster, that financial disaster, were the derivatives market, right? All the the CDOs and CDCs, right? Well, today we have more CDO derivatives than we did back then.
Yep.
Okay? They're real big, and you look around, you go to any major city in America, and I think in Australia too. There are a lot of strip malls out there with vacancy signs on. They're empty.
Mm-hmm.
So the collateralized mortgage obligations, okay, the CMOs, and the CREs, these things are going. I'm surprised they haven't crashed yet. I think they're being held up through artificial measures. But that when that big crash comes in the commercial real estate market, you're going to see a lot of banks go out of business overnight. That's why I think between now and this fall, we're going to see another round of bank failures, and the cause of it is going to be these real estate mortgage obligations, coming due, and they're going to default, and a lot of banks are going to lose billions of dollars. They're going to go out of business. So there are going to be more bank runs. So any one of these little events, look, when markets have big moves up or down, it's because something was a surprise event. Surprise events are what drive big moves, big spikes in the market.
So what do you think? What do you think is going to come next? So it's driven by interest rates. Interest rates are causing this. We're going to continue to see interest rates rising, so things are going to be more expensive, and the Reserve is putting more pain into the economy to take the heat out of the economy to slow inflation. But inflation is far higher than where interest rates are, so you have to cause a great deal of pain in order for that to happen. And as you're causing the pain with the rise of the interest rates, you're killing the bond market all at the same time. So what comes next? How long can that go on? That balance, because there is no, as we say, equilibrium in that market at all. There's no balance, man.
Right. Well, this is part of the scam that's being played on us by the Federal Reserve. Okay. So on the one end, yeah, they're raising rates, ostensibly to fight inflation, right? That's the buzzer. Yeah, we have to get inflation down below 2%, and we're determined to do it. God damn it! And if it makes you poorer, that's just the price you pay. That's
the price you pay for me printing too much money.
That's right. That's right. But then on the other end, what they're doing is they're quietly feeding money to the banks and propping them up by sending them billions upon billions of dollars through the back door. You don't hear a lot about that, but there's a lot of QE going on the back side of this. So on the front side, so they're just making the problem worse and worse and worse. Rather than just letting the market,
float to its own level. Let the free market figure it out. Instead of doing that, they're trying to manipulate it. Because now one of the reasons is they want to stay in power. They've got an election coming up. I know it sounds oversimplified. I swear to God, politics do play a serious role in these kind of decision making. And then we pay the price later on. We suffer the consequences later on. The financial situation that we're in today is largely a result of the efforts they took back in 2008. Okay, so really, the financial system ended in 2008. It just doesn't know it yet. It's over. And
how much longer do you think it's got? I mean, we talk about this every other day, but what is the horizon? What is the time horizon? Do we have 6 months, 6 years, 60 more years of this? Like I look at the last bit of choppy waters that we were trying to navigate was the debt ceiling in the United States, and then they negotiate some deal about not doing something, or nobody's happy with the deal because it's a negotiation, and then they decide that they're going to print $4 trillion more, and we're going to allow the debt ceiling to be raised again. And now we're approaching really, really dangerous waters because the amount of interest that's required to be paid back on the borrowings from the US government is almost higher than the actual revenue that comes in. So we're getting very, very close to the end of it. And that, in my view, seems to be about 3 or 4 years away. But if there's some sort of black swan event, to your point, and then it takes the heat out of the market completely and there's a giant collapse, then that might be accelerated as well. So do you have a crystal ball that you gaze into and think that it might be 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 6 years? What will it be? Yeah. What do you think?
I kind of do, but I want to be a little more specific. So the first thing that's going to go are going to be the banks. The banks are going to go first. Then the dollar is going to go. Then the bond markets are going to go. And when that comes in, and then we're talking about the end of the actual fiscal market as we know it. We're talking about universal coins, okay, and they're all designed, they're ready to go, and yeah, I agree with you. I think about 3 to 5 years from now is when you're not going to have a local bank in your town anymore. You're going to be doing everything online through your Federal Reserve account, and it'll be very difficult for you to conduct transactions in U.S. dollars. It will be in some form. You'll be able to do some. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to have a big black market there for a while. In the interim, between that period where the dollar gets outlawed, and that is going to happen, by the way. They are going to outlaw cash at some point. Between that announcement and people not using them anymore, there's going to be a big black market period where people are going to they will continue to use dollars on the side, that kind of thing. And that could go on for a couple of years. But it'll be more and more difficult to conduct your life officially outside of the system. So I think, my guess, I'd be very surprised if 5 years from now, the system hasn't completely been redone, unless somebody pushes back, unless we get someone, like a Trump or some major politician who puts a kibosh on this. It could happen. We do have some politicians pushing back on some of this stuff. So unless that happens, this is the progression.
Money here in Australia, cash, has been outlawed before here in Australia.
I did not know that.
I never really thought about it until just now, until you kind of said that. Because when you talk about a black market, right, and it goes on for a period of time, because these things just take time. There's a transition. I can remember in my lifetime where the Australian government banned 2 bills. So we used to have a $1 bill and a $2 bill. And the $1 bill turned into a $1 coin and $2 into a $2 coin. But they actually, they didn't ban them. They kind of made it like a soft transition that you can, whatever you've got, you can still use. Yeah, but when it comes back into the till and it goes back to the bank, it ain't coming back out. It'll go as a coin. So cash has been banned before. Yeah.
Not cash. I mean, denominations have been banned.
But you look at it and you think, oh my God, if they're going to get rid of cash altogether, will that be a problem in our society? And when you think about it, actually, if it goes over an extended period of time, over 3 to 5 years, you probably won't even notice. You're the proverbial frog in the pot being boiled, and you don't even realize until it's actually happened to you. And you're kind of like, and even now, I think there would be a large percentage of people in society, I'm one of them, that simply don't use cash. I don't have a need for cash. I don't have cash in my wallet. I just got my phone everywhere and I just pay like that. What do I care about cash for, man? You know, if I have that, like, it just, I don't know. It's not such a big deal to me. Like, but it does take away your autonomy, and it takes away your autonomy because there's no anonymity related to a digital transaction. Like when I have cash, I can just buy whatever I want with whoever I want, whenever I want, and nobody knows anything about it. And that's the beauty of that system, and that's the great thing about it. But I don't seem to be part of that system anymore, simply because I just got my phone in my pocket, and what do I want to take my wallet for, and why do I want to put $20 in my pocket? You know.
Oh man, they love you right now.
I do.
Right now.
It's convenient, see?
Yeah, it's convenient. And that's the way they're selling the Fed Now system and the upcoming CBD, the convenience of it all.
Oh, it's so convenient, man. It's convenient to put all your government ID into one app as well.
That's right. That's right.
I'm not doing anything wrong, man. It's fine. I just put everything there.
Yeah, sure. I've got nothing to hide, so sure, I'll give you all my personal information. Yeah, I've got a blood clot. You want to know when I got it and how long I had it? And you sure?
You've got all the information anyway. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And so, you know, a true freedom-seeking person wants to be outside of the system as much as he can, right?
Yeah.
I'm not lecturing you. I'm just saying, you know.
No, you are. Stop using your phone and go and get some cash.
But I know that at the very least, even though you don't actually use cash very much, you want to have the option of using cash. That's right. Yeah. And that's what they're taking away from you. And so that's what I mean by outlawing. When they outlaw it, that means you will not have the option. It will not be legal tender anymore. They will literally be illegal to use. Right? So that's what I mean by outlawing. I think there is going to be a point where cash will be just plain outlawed. You will not be allowed to use it. It will not be used as legal tender anymore. And if you're caught with it, you know, you'll be in trouble. So that day is coming. But I think we're looking probably 3 or 5 years out. By then, I'll probably be on a beach somewhere in the South Pacific. You know,
that's it. Yeah, you'll be in the Solomon Islands with Chinese guards around.
There you go. There you go. Yeah,
and I'll be keeping you safe.
Yeah, I'll be trading blue jeans with the soldiers, to, you know, for favors for stuff, and yeah.
There it is. There it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's shift gears. I'm not going to throw to the break today. I want to go straight to the story about NATO and Zelensky. Here he is in Vilnius, getting all hot under the collar and carrying on. And man, when you see the picture of all of the NATO leaders, everybody's in a suit. Everybody looks like $1 million. They all look like statesmen and stateswomen, and they're the leaders of Europe, and they're the people that are in charge. And this guy can't even be bothered having a shave. He's got out of his jumper and got into his hoodie. It's such a bad look, man. Doesn't he realize, like, he looks like a criminal, he looks like a gangster, and just the optics of it. If you didn't know who this guy was, and you saw him at a microphone like that, you'd look at that and think, well, who is this guy? Like, just, dude, have a shave, man, and like tidy yourself up, get your shit together. Because what it shows to me is that it's not your personal bearing, your dress and bearing is reflective of how you carry yourself. And if your dress and bearing was a little bit better and it looked, that's why in the military, man, you have to have a short haircut and you shave. And in the Australian military, you're not allowed to have a beard and you're not allowed to have long hair, and your uniform better be pressed and your shoes better be polished as well. Like, your dress and bearing is important because it gives you a certain feeling. Sure, it's a pain in the ass. That's the first feeling it gives to you. But when you put it on, you know that it makes you feel good, and you feel good when you're properly dressed. A little bit like you when you went to Wall Street, Ed.
Yep.
You put on a nice suit, man. Yep. You know, it's expensive. It's like cut and tailored directly to you. You've got a nice tie. Yep. You've got really nice shoes. It feels nice to wear those things and to do that. But it's like a slob.
Well, also, you know, and suits are a form of uniform.
It's a uniform.
Right? It's a derivative of military uniforms, and
it is.
And it's a way of showing respect. You know, if I were to show up at a meeting with some guy on Wall Street looking like that,
yeah,
they wouldn't take me seriously. So it's the same thing, right? Yeah, I agree with you.
And the excuse that, oh, like, I'm the leader of a country at war. Okay, yeah, you had that excuse, man, and I get it for the first. If you're at home and people are coming to meet with you inside of the presidential palace or whatever, look, I get it. You're running around in a t-shirt all day long because you've been up since 5 o'clock in the morning. You don't go to bed till midnight. I get it. Like, fine, you don't wear a suit doing that. But when you're going abroad and when you're going away asking for hundreds of millions of dollars and you're getting handouts, you're asking for weapons, you're doing all these things, man, at least have a little bit of self-respect. It just kind of goes to the very heart of the behavior of these people and the culture as well, man. You know, I'm not here to bash anybody, but he doesn't realize the optics of what it looks like. And as an Aussie who, you know, is a taxpayer and the Australian government is giving hundreds of millions of dollars to this country, I look at that and I look at this guy and think, why are you giving money to this guy? Really? Just the optics of that on the front end is so bad. And anyway, people would say, what's that got to do with the war and the Russians invading? And well, it's got everything to do with it, right? It's got everything to do with it because every little nuance matters and every little thing matters. So he got up and he made a speech, and here are the headlines from the Ukrainian propaganda of the speech. Really, I kind of summed it up in the intro there, but Ukraine's accession into NATO has been approved, and we don't have a time frame for it. But one of the things that's holding that up is the MAP, the Membership Action Plan. And as I mentioned before, the Membership Action Plan covers political, economic, defense, resource, security, and legal aspects of joining NATO, and NATO have brushed that aside and said you don't have to worry about that. So the other thing that happened overnight is Sweden had been accepted into NATO. So we've got we've got a new member in there as well. And essentially, Ukraine can be considered, so the third point there, a de facto member of NATO in all aspects apart from the security guarantees. So that really what they're kind of locking in there is the economic aspect of it. And it's kind of hard to get a read on what any of it means because there's no real formal thing that they've kind of come out and said yet that I could find. So Jens Stoltenberg hasn't stood at the podium and said, this is what it means and this is what's going to happen. And Ukraine will be members of NATO when they meet this. But really, essentially what they've said is they're not going to be members of NATO until the war ends. That's it. So there is no being half pregnant where they're half in and half out. They've been given all of the, how do you say it? All of the trimmings that come with being in NATO, except the security guarantee. And the reason they're not giving them the security guarantee is because they're at war. And NATO's not going to dive into a hot conflict straight away like that. But what it does say to me is that NATO are going to continue to supply weapons to them, and the Ukrainians will fight on behalf of NATO for an extended period of time. So I look at all that and I think, you know, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for this war? How is that going to affect our economies? What does it all mean? I just look at it and I think, well, when will the conditions be met for them to be in NATO? That's what you have to look at. And the conditions will be met when the war is over. That's it. And if there comes an armistice, so this might be the long game of 4D chess that everybody's playing as well. It could be that, all right, I'm going to go to the negotiating table and I'm going to go and negotiate a settlement. Let's lock in the front lines exactly where they are. Okay, they're locked in. And everybody's worried about, if we stop the fighting now, then Putin will just reconstitute his forces, rearm himself and keep going. And Poland will be next. And Estonia will be next. And they'll roll up those states over there as well. But the reality is if they stop right now where they are and Zelensky goes, okay, we've stopped, the war's over. Look, we've signed an armistice. It's over. Can we be in NATO? They go, okay, now you're in NATO. Okay, cool. Oh, look, they're shooting at us. And then they can go and provoke them, and then now we can go and stop it straight away. And then NATO get into war. So it could be something that stops and it starts, and then it stops again, and then it starts again. But this time it starts with NATO in it because Ukraine are in NATO. And Zelensky's all pissed off and frustrated that, hey, we don't have a time frame associated with this. Well, if you were playing that long game of 4D chess, then maybe that's what you would actually do. So don't be surprised if we see a peace negotiation actually happen sooner rather than later and leaving everything locked in where it is for the time being, because the Ukrainians know that once they're in NATO, the Russians won't be able to help themselves and they'll start shooting and start attacking, and then off we go. Article 5's invoked and everybody's there this time. So it might end before you actually realize, and it might end before this counteroffensive bullshit gets started, or it doesn't get started, or it is getting started. I don't know. Who knows? The Ukrainians came out and said in the last 3 weeks, they've taken back more land than the Russians took in 6 months. So is that the counteroffensive that's happening live here in front of us? Well, maybe it could be. I don't know. I don't know what to believe anymore. All I know is that we keep sending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, all countries. The EU have given guarantees. There was more from a series of other countries. I can't remember them. There was like 4 or 5 of them that I read this morning before I kicked off here that had guaranteed hundreds of millions of dollars more in weapons heading over there. And it's just like, when is this going to end? Like, when does it? It's not about land, man. It's just ridiculous.
You know, if there are more than 20 functioning brain cells among the NATO leaders, then Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. Because, you know,
well, the whole point of the Russians invading was that we don't want Ukraine to be in NATO. And
well, that was their excuse,
making
right?
moves towards that. Now you're actually saying you're going to actually do that. So that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the Russian reaction.
Yeah, I think the only way there would be a ceasefire where Russia agreed to it. Okay, we'll stop here only if you agree not to join NATO. Because as soon as you join NATO, all bets are off. So I think that'll be a prerequisite to.
And that's the problem with the negotiation, right?
Yeah.
You know, Zelensky trying to get ahead of it all and saying, all right, let's negotiate, let's stop. Okay, let's stop where we are. But the Russians are going to say, no, we're not stopping there, because as soon as we stop there, you're just going to join NATO. And then as soon as the whole point that we're here was to disarm you. Then
this war is easily fixed. I'm sorry. It really is not that complicated, in my opinion. You know, Rob and I were talking about this off camera yesterday. You know, Trump has been bragging lately how he could end the war in 24 hours. Yeah, so could I. I could too. But just call Zelensky, say, you know what? You're cut off. You're not getting any more stuff. And what I want you to, I'll give you a chance to be the peacemaker here. You can be the big guy. You can be the guy who wins the Nobel Prize. You can say, you know what? I'm gonna go to the negotiating table and I'm gonna tell you, you know. And what does Putin want? Putin basically wants, all right, so give him the Donbass, a little sliver of, you know, polluted water, you know, Soviet tank building factories. Let them have that, you know, and you keep the beautiful Kiev and all the nice, you know, farming fields and everything, you know, and say, okay, that's the new line, and we promise not to join NATO. That's all Putin really wants. He wants a nice big fat buffer between NATO and Russia. So I don't think Putin really wants to take over all of Ukraine, because if he did, now he's going to be on the border of NATO. So I don't think he wants to take over Ukraine. I think he wants that to be want there to be a buffer. I don't think it's really that complicated. And then he tells Zelensky, all right, you know what, we're going to chip in. We're going to give you and your inner circle there like $10 million each. Go and retire in the Maldives and just go away. And I think he'll jump at it.
You know, the stated objectives of the Russians were the denazification of Ukraine, whatever that means. And we've got Izzy in the comments saying, why is no one mentioning the trident logo he wears? Well, that's the logo of, and that's the emblem of Ukraine, right? That's the neo-Nazi gangster Mason puppet. Well, you know, there's a lot of people that say that Zelensky is a cocaine addict. Have you seen that? And you see him all the time. He's wiping his nose like that, you know, like his body language and his habits and stuff like that. And if you've ever seen anybody that takes cocaine, they kind of behave in the same way. And you got to scratch your head and wonder, like, why isn't anyone so Izzy there is saying the quiet part out loud, just calling it out, just saying it straight up. Why aren't you saying it straight up? I made a video yesterday and people were, we want to give hundreds of millions of dollars to these people, but we don't want to talk about the actual things that matter. And for me, it seems like a really strange thing that you want to continue supplying all of this. You want to continue this. You're prolonging all of everything that's happening, but for some reason you don't want to talk about what Izzy is talking about there. Let me just show you a picture. You don't want to talk about that? What? Why don't you want to talk about that? What's the go with that? I know that's an older photo, and I know that that's what's going on, but that's not the only photo. And if you go and just Google that for 5 minutes, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. And is how come we're giving hundreds of millions of dollars, but there's no one talking about that? Look at the tattoo on that guy's chest. Yeah. You know, right. That flag is one thing, but that tattoo is something completely different.
You're tempting the algorithm here, man.
I know, but you know, that flag is something, that's one thing, but that tat is something different. And, you know, if you go onto Russian Telegram channels, you'll see lots of that, lots and lots and lots of that. And no one's talking about that, but we want to continue to give lots and lots of money there. And it just makes I don't know how to feel about it, because I know that the Russians shouldn't be invading. They shouldn't be doing that. They should, and the stated goal is a denazification of their and the demilitarization of Ukraine. And we know, actually, from what you just stated about Trump and how Trump would end it, he would just say, look, there's no more weapons, man. That's it. That's the end of the weapons. Go and negotiate, and you'll get a Nobel Prize. That's it. Stop it.
Call Putin and figure it out.
That's how we know that the Russians have won. Because if we stop supplying them weapons, they'll lose very quickly. And the attrition that they will have, because it's a war of attrition, the Russian military is just bigger. They might not be that competent, but they're bigger, and they've got more supplies, and they can supply themselves because they're at home infinitely, forever. But the Ukrainians can only last as long as we continue to supply them. So therefore, the Russians have won the war of attrition. So if we cut them off, like Trump says, or even RFK says, I'll end that as well. And even if Biden just one day wakes up and has an old man grandpa fit and says, I don't want to do this anymore, and cuts everybody off, then the whole thing is over and the Russians have won. The Russians have already won when you look at it like that. It's a little bit like the financial system we always laugh about, saying that in 2008 was when it ended. It's been on life support ever since. The Ukrainian economy and the Ukrainian military has been on life support because we continue to supply them. Yeah. If the Australian government doesn't continue to supply them with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of vehicles, they have no vehicles and they can't move around the battlefield. And if they can't move around the battlefield, the Russians have got more trucks and cars and tanks and APCs, and they can move around the battlefield than the Ukrainians are stuffed. Like, man,
this is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. This is a war between America and Russia, and this is just a proxy war. And it's not about borders. It's not about freaking democracy. It's not about Nazis. It's about what, Rob?
Money.
There you go.
Money. It's about money and bricks. The
Brussels. I think a really good business would be the sole provider to Ukraine for paper bags, the official paper bag supplier. A lot of money is being handed in brown paper bags. I'd be the official brown paper bag. Yeah, brown paper bags. I'd be the official brown paper bag provider. A lot of brown paper bags filled with dollar bills are being passed around in this war.
Well, what do you think about this? Like Zelensky's having a bit of a tantrum that he hasn't been accepted into NATO, and he's saying, oh, well, what else are we supposed to do? Our military is now compliant with NATO because you gave us all the stuff. Our tactics are all compliant with NATO because you trained us, and all of what we do is the same as what you guys do in NATO. And they go, okay, we'll waive the map thing because we'll overlook the fact that you're corrupt and allow you to be in here and allow you to be part of it. And then he's all frustrated and cranky about it. What do you think about that, Ed? Do you think?
I think it's one of two things. I think he's either delusional, okay, and he thinks he actually has a shot at this, and he feels like an entitled teenager. He feels I'm entitled to this, right? I'm entitled.
I'm fighting for you.
Yeah, I'm fighting for you, so I'm entitled. But also this could be a negotiation tactic, as far as we know. He might be using NATO as a leverage for better terms at the negotiation table. With Russia. Who knows? Maybe he'll go to Putin at some point and say, you know what? Okay, I promise not to join NATO anymore. Again, I don't think Putin wants Ukraine. I think if he had a quote puppet government, a friendly government to Russia in Ukraine, he would be happy, which is what he had, before the Maidan Revolution, right? That's what he had. That's why they were allowed to, they were simpatico. It was a similar relationship between them and Belarus, right? They were that close. So, and you know what? I don't think the average Ukrainian's life will not change dramatically under that kind of arrangement than before, because Ukraine is so unbelievably corrupt. It can't get any worse than that. Even if Russia were to take them over, all in, they'd probably be better off under Putin, quite frankly. A little strong arm of the law.
Now you're really tempting the algorithm. My pictures are not tempting anything compared to those comments.
Okay, you're right.
Well, it's like saying the Solomon Islands would be better off with the Chinese than they would with Australia, New Zealand, and America. Well, it's up to the Solomon Islands to decide where they want to be better off at. So here's my closing thought on it for you. I completely agree with you when you say he's acting like an entitled, spoilt brat. And for you to get up in Villeneuve's and get a bit cranky and get a bit fired up about all of that is real. That level of entitlement is like quite unpleasant for me to watch, because essentially I don't know what you think about this, Ed, but what it feels like to me is there's an expectation that he has, Zelensky that is, that we sacrifice, and I'm not talking on behalf of Ukrainian people because I have no idea what they're thinking about any of this or even what they think about him. All I know is that they rally behind him, but is that because the propaganda tells you that? Maybe he's really unpopular. We've got a couple of people watching this, and in the comments, both of the comments are saying that they don't like him. You know, they like really despise the guy. And I'm not saying I like him or I hate him. I don't have any really opinion. All I'm doing is observing. And what I'm observing, and when I see that is, as an Australian that's given hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money and hardware and equipment to them, what I see is that he expects other countries, even non-NATO members like Australia, to sacrifice on their behalf. And it's a little bit like saying, you need to go and get injected with something because you're going to keep everybody else safe. But I'm not injecting my children with anything to keep some hypothetical person safe that may or may not get sick. Why would I compromise the health of my child to potentially help somebody that I don't know or don't care about or have no interest in? And it's really the same as what he's doing here. He's asking us to compromise our security. And even if Joe Biden did make a mistake yesterday, so think of that, where, hey, Joe, why are you sending cluster munitions? Because we're out of ammunition. So even if he tripped up on what he said and he meant to say they're out of ammunition, meaning the Ukrainians, which is what I think he actually meant to say. Because we're out of ammunition. And I think when he said where, he means the collective, like us. We're out of ammunition there, so we need to give them something else. And we're not out of ammunition in America. They're out of ammunition is what he really meant to say. But what he's saying is, I need you to sacrifice your blood and your treasure so we can be safe. But it's your conflict, man. It's not our blood and our treasure, and you're the president in charge of being able to solve that problem in the first place. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that to us? Why should we be forced to actually go through that? And to me, as an Australian that's given away hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, I think, at what point does it end? We've given you everything that we can, and you're asking us for the old F-18s, you're asking us for the old M1 tanks, you keep asking us, and our government keeps supporting you, and our government keeps saying we're going to support you as long as it takes, but nobody, for whatever reason, wants to talk about that or that, and no one wants to talk about the war crimes, and no one wants to talk about his maybe drug habit that's going on there. No one wants to talk about the things that are really obvious to everybody else, but they continue to support it and prolong it. And really what it comes down to in the end, Ed, is this what you said, man. It's because the war is not about land. It's not about that at all, man. And the war for the Russians is about land. It's about creating a buffer zone between them and NATO. That's exactly what the war is about for them. But for us, it's about the systematic destruction of Russia, which is not working. It's not working. It was never going to work.
No. And this was the fantasy that these people have. You know, the Senator Grahams of the world, that they think they can get. They're obsessed with getting rid of Putin.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay, well, but they have no imagination. Okay, so you get rid of Putin, then what?
Then what? You get Prigozhin. Or Kadyrov, even worse, man.
And you know, Izzy made a good point. He was asking me about, you know, poking the bear. I'm not quite sure what you meant about the pushing back about about the going. I can't read about the Putin.
Russia's the only country defending against the bio-weapon science laboratories and the chemtrails. NATO, NASA, aircraft, aerosols. I don't really know much about that. I can't really comment on that. The bio-weapon thing.
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine, packed full of Biden-backed, chem plants,
And what about all the child trafficking and stuff that we're talking about from The Sound of Freedom and that movie and all of the other things that Mel Gibson's about to expose as well? Like, governments don't not know about these things. I don't buy into it for a second that they don't know about it.
I mean, look, what does America, what does Australia, what do we get out of this war? What are we fighting for? What do we get, Rob? Please tell me.
That's my whole point, right? Is that there's this massive entitlement to actually why he expects us to do that. But what you're expecting us to do is to inflict a wound on ourselves to protect you. But what are we protecting you from? You're the one that was supposed to protect yourself in the first place, and you made your bed and you kind of got to lie in it. And, I'm not saying that what the Russians did by invading is right, but you set the conditions for that to be right, and you could have prevented it. And you did prevent it, and that you agreed to a peace treaty, but then you got railroaded by the Americans and the British to not be part of that peace treaty. But you didn't stand up for yourself, and now we have to pay the price of all of that by supplying our blood and our treasure to you, and you drawing us closer to a nuclear war than any time in history. Like, what? Come on, man. At some point, this has got to end, and the entitlement of a guy running around Europe on red carpets in a jumper has to stop sooner or later.
When you think about it, Zelensky might have a nice trump card if he knew how to use it, and it might have a good source of blackmail. Because over a year ago there was a peace treaty on the table. Well,
that's what I mean. But he walked away from that, and he could have solved that problem right then and there.
But why did he walk away from it? Because Boris Johnson had told him, had instructed him to, at our bidding, at America's bidding. So he's. I'm sure he said, we had that conversation. If he was smart, he had taped it. We had this conversation where I would agree to walk away from the treaty if NATO backed me all the way in this war until we won. And I've got the recording, guys. And unless you give me everything I want, I'm going to send that recording to CNN.
So part of, I'll close out the show based on that point, because imagine if that was the case and that actually was how he felt. The emotion that I feel when you say that is frustration. So Zelensky never negotiated that deal. That was his foreign minister who went and actually, and Putin's holding the thing up going, look, he signed. Yeah. And he signed it, and he said that what it was. So he took it back to Kyiv, and he looks in Kyiv and goes, okay, cool. And then Boris goes, no, we're not doing that. And then Zelensky's in the middle of it going, okay, cool, this is going to be over soon because NATO's going to back us. And here we are, 12 months on from that actually happening, and closer to this ending. In fact, this is looking like it's going to go on for another 5 years. It's going to go on for much longer than what you anticipated, because you're only being kind of half supported. And you're being half supported because the powers that be want the destruction of Russia, and the price that has to be paid is Ukraine. But then the frustration that you see from Zelensky about saying, well, the Australian government should give us your old F-18s and your old M1 tanks. Come on, hand them over. Come on, pass them over to us. You're not going to use them anymore. Give them to us. It's like, no, man, get your own tanks. Get your own planes. But I see what I'm trying to say is that Zelensky's stuck between a rock and a hard place. He agreed in principle to the negotiated deal for it all to stop, but then the people that are actually backing and funding his entire government and the corruption that is there are saying, no, you don't. You're not doing that. And he's in the middle of it going, And then it's his people that are being killed as a result. So he's frustrated. And now at this Villeneuve summit, he comes out and he gets all fired up and he's all like angry about it all. And it's no surprise because he's frustrated about it. He's like, I had the peace deal, and then you said you were going to back me, and here I am, and now you're saying you're not going to back me? What am I supposed to do? What is this? And it's no surprise that he's frustrated and angry, and it's no surprise that he's walking around Europe in a jumper because he just doesn't have any respect for him, because they said that they were going to do something and they're only half doing it. And that's the frustration he's experiencing.
Okay, well, the last thing I'll say on this topic is that I think Zelensky is just a useful idiot. I don't think he,
in the middle of it, exactly.
And he's being used as a way for the West to launder money. And you have moneyed interest in this war, and I think to a large extent we're throwing so much money at this country, and trust me, a lot of it is being repatriated. A lot of it is coming back. A lot of people in the Washington D.C. suburbs are building a lot of beautiful houses off of this war, and I think that this is a way for the U.S. to launder money. I think it's a big money laundering operation. That's what I think this war is. That's what it's really all about, and it's a real sin and disgrace that actual people have given their lives over this.
Yeah, it's an absolute tragedy that's going on. When we say it all the time, Ed, war is a complete and total failure of humanity, and this is absolutely no different at all. All right, mate, let's wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for your report on the bond market and the interesting discussion as always. Have you got any final thoughts or closing remarks before we close it out, mate?
God save someone. I'm trying to think of someone clever to save them. God save the Queen.
God save Biden, I think.
Yeah. God save. Oh,
There it is.
God help
Right,
him
everyone.
out.
We'll
God
see you
help him,
tomorrow.
man.
Bye for now.
Right.